Hi, I'm Sean, a wildlife photographer based in San Francisco, and today I'm going to walk you through some of my favorite wildlife photography images that I've taken and some of the lessons that I've learned from each of them. So I'll be scrolling through my Instagram here, at Sean Fleming if you want to follow, and taking you through some of the stories behind my favorite images and if I learned any lessons from them. So starting off with this one. This photo of the elk, I think I mentioned before, was the photo that got me into wildlife photography. To this day, it still remains one of my favorite images that I've ever taken. And I think the main lesson here is if your photography is getting stale, switch it up and try something new. If you haven't tried wildlife photography, give it a shot. I actually went up to take landscape photos this day up in Point Reyes, but as I was walking around, I just kept seeing wildlife left and right. And then on my drive home, I saw this beautiful scene on the side of the road and pulled over. And ever since then, I've been hooked. If you scroll through my Instagram, since that date, it's been like 99% wildlife since then. And speaking of driving home, I actually learned an important lesson from taking photos of this coyote pup up in Point Reyes. And that's, at the end of the day, even if you think you're all done taking photos, don't let your guard down, because that one great photo might be waiting for you on the drive home. And that's what happened here. I had gone up to Point Reyes again, and it was a super foggy, cold day, and there was really no wildlife out the entire day. I didn't get any good photos, didn't see barely any wildlife. If there was wildlife, it was hidden behind the fog, so you couldn't see it. So I left early and a bit disappointed for the day, and as I was driving home, I saw this coyote pup on the side of the road and quickly pulled over and was able to follow it through this field as it hunted for mice or whatever in the grass, and I was able to get a couple great photos out of it. And luckily, even though I was done for the day, I had kept my gear out on the passenger seat just in case I happened to see something as I drove home. So the lesson there is, even at the end of the day when you're packing up and ready to go home, don't put your gear away just yet, and don't let your guard down. I've had so many times where I'm walking back to my car or driving home, and then all of a sudden the best shot of the day comes up out of nowhere. And let's move on to another coyote for a bit more of a technical lesson, and this one is you can keep your shutter speed a lot lower than you think you can. This photo was taken pretty late in the evening, so I didn't have a ton of light to work with, and my 50-400 is at f6.3 at the long end, so not a ton of light there either. So my only option to get a usable photo here was to test the limits of my shutter speed. And this photo was taken at 1/40th of a second at 400 millimeters. And you may have heard the old reciprocal rule, which is your shutter speed should be at your focal length or higher. So if you're at 400 millimeters, your shutter speed should be 400th of a second or higher to capture the image without motion blur. But with modern cameras with great image stabilization, you can push this rule a lot further than you think. And the real trick here is to just take a lot of photos. If you're taking photos at a low shutter speed, it doesn't mean that all of your photos are going to be blurry if it's too low. It just means that the percentage of sharp ones is going to go down. So if I'm shooting at a lower shutter speed, just take a burst, even if you don't need to. Even if there's no fast moving action, take a burst anyway, and a couple of those images might turn up sharp, and you can really push your shutter speed down further. Do some tests at home. See with your longest lens how low you can push the shutter speed in a control environment by just bursting, and maybe you get a 10th keeper rate at 1/40th of a second. But if you're able to shoot 10 photos, you might get a good one. Next up, I have a photo of this fox mom and pup. And the lesson that I learned here is that your most important asset in wildlife photography is not your camera, it's not your lens, it's other wildlife photographers in the community. A red fox was one of my dream finds. I love red foxes, and I didn't know if I'd ever be able to find one out in the wild. I'd seen a couple people in the area post photos of foxes and tried to ask for locations, but no one was willing to give it up. But as I was out and about in Point Reyes, I ran into some other photographers and we got to talking, and I saw one of them post a picture of a fox a couple days later on their Instagram, and since we had made that connection in person, they were willing to share where those photos were taken, and so I was able to go and finally get that great picture of a red fox. There's all kinds of apps out there like iNaturalist and some bird-specific apps that can help you to find wildlife, but I've found that some of my best finds have been talking with other photographers and them giving me tips on where stuff is and what patterns they're following right now. There's no better way to get the intel on the wildlife than the people that are there every day. Next up, I have this photo of a mule deer taken up in Point Reyes. And the lesson I learned from this photo is let the environment help you tell your story. Now, at the time that I took this photo, I had just started in wildlife photography, and the longest lens that I had was only 200 millimeters, which may sound pretty long, but in terms of wildlife, it's really not a ton of reach when your animals are so far away sometimes. And from this photo, and really a lot of photos during this period of time, I kind of used that constraint to my advantage and use the environments around me in conjunction with the animals to tell a story in my photos. Close-up portraits of animals are always nice. I love taking those too, but sometimes if you zoom out and show a little bit more of the environment and where the animal's living and what it's doing, it can make for a more interesting photo. I know it's really tempting to crank that zoom all the way in when you see an animal, but next time you're out, try zooming out a bit and getting some more of the environment and see how you like it. You can always crop in afterwards. Next up is one of my favorite photos I've taken of a great horned owl. This one was in Golden Gate Park, and I've been going back to the same set of owls over and over again. And the lesson here is that consistency is key in wildlife photography. I've gone out to see these owls dozens of times, and every time you get something a little bit different. They might be really close, they might be really far up in a tree, but after a while of coming back over and over and over again, I was able to get this great close-up portrait of the owl on a branch. Animals are unpredictable. You never know where they're gonna be or what they're gonna do that day. But if you keep coming back over and over, you're bound to get something good. So if you don't get something one day, keep coming back to the same spot and you never know what you're gonna get. Next up, another environmental animal shot, but this time the lesson here is that timing is everything. When you're shooting wildlife, animals are sometimes moving at high speed. Even if they're not running around, just the tilt of a head for a second or something can make that difference in a good photo or an okay photo. So in this case, I was up at Mount Tam looking over the landscapes and I saw this hawk that was making circles up in the sky. And I saw this cargo ship out in the distance on the ocean, and I saw them about to align in the sky, and I brought up my camera and took one single shot and just happened to get them perfectly aligned. So very lucky in that case, but without that perfect alignment, this photo wouldn't be what it is. And I've had tons and tons of photos where the animal just looks at you for a split second and that's when you get the shot. So again, timing is key. Be in burst mode, even if you don't think you have to capture those small differences. And when you're bringing them back onto your computer, you might see that that one small moment is really the one that mattered. Next up is this photo of a bobcat, which is one of my favorites I've taken of them. And I think some of the biggest lessons I've learned while photographing bobcats is how to respect your fellow photographers out in the field. Now, when I first went up to shoot bobcats, I was super excited to see them. And when I would see another photographer taking a picture of a bobcat, I would go right up and start taking pictures alongside them. But as I've come back over and over again, I've learned a bit more about the etiquette of working with other photographers out in the field. So if you see another photographer out in the field taking pictures of an animal, don't necessarily immediately go over and start taking photos with them. Give them a minute to get their shot, and then usually I'll kind of slowly approach from the side, let them see that I'm there, give them a thumbs up, and I've never had anyone say, go away, but as long as they know you're there and you're not sneaking up behind people, I found that that's a better practice. I also have a funny story too from shooting bobcats about bad wildlife photographer etiquette and what not to do. I was up shooting a bobcat and there was a couple of us photographers around. There was a bobcat sitting in a field taking a nap, and there was maybe 2 or 3 of us taking some photos and just kind of waiting for it to get up. And then all of a sudden this big Sprinter van shows up and 6 guys all with big lenses dressed in all camo with these huge tripods come out and just start click, click, click all the tripods, setting them up and like surrounding the bobcat. And the whole time they're talking to each other, making jokes, making noises, like all the stuff while this bobcat is trying to take a nap in front of us. Now somehow this did not disturb the bobcat and it didn't get up and run away, which I was very surprised at. And as we sat there, these guys started getting impatient and talking to each other. They started making coffee in the van and laughing and talking out loud and stuff as the other photographers were kind of giving them the side eye of like, hey, be quiet, we're in nature, we're trying to get pictures of this bobcat. Eventually they started getting impatient and actually started making like chirping noises and whistles, and one of them said, hey, you should throw a rock at it to get it to wake up. And that's when another wild photographer finally spoke up and was like, hey, no, too far. Eventually, when the bobcat got up, one of the photographers literally took his camera to his face and started like running at the bobcat basically with it. And one of the other photographers really gave him an earful that time. One of the people later in the day also told me that one of them in a separate incident had gone up while they were taking a photo and set up their tripod directly in front of the other person and started taking pictures. It was really just everything not to do condensed into one single group that day. And as I was talking to photographers throughout the day, everyone kept complaining about them. So lesson there, do not be that guy. Don't travel in big packs and be loud and obnoxious with lots of gear. And keep your distance, be respectful of the wildlife. Don't go running at it, don't go making noises and throwing rocks at it, none of that stuff. And another bobcat photo here, the lesson here being that patience is key. Me and another woman were following around this bobcat for maybe 10 minutes or so when it took a nap in this field of brush on the side of the road. And we stood there and waited for it to get up for probably about an hour. And that's how I got this shot, was just waiting there, kind of just whispering to each other, standing, waiting for it to move. And that's the reality of what wildlife photography is sometimes. It's not you running around getting pictures left and right of all these animals, chasing everything down. A lot of the time it's just you sitting in a field for an hour waiting for a bobcat to wake up from its nap to get the shot. And I'll leave you with this last one. This is a photo of a raccoon family out in Golden Gate Park. It's always great to get pictures of animals by themselves, but I love when I can get them interacting with each other. Again, like the environment, animals with other animals helps tell an even more compelling story. Now, obviously this is something that's harder to do in practice than in theory, but if you want to take pictures of animals together, look for animals that tend to hang out together, like raccoons. When I go out and take pictures of owls, they're usually hanging out by themselves or in a pair, and sometimes they're not even close to each other. They're just kind of in opposite trees hanging out. But animals like raccoons, foxes, coyotes, any animal that tends to travel in a pack is great for getting some of those more interactive shots and getting pictures of them hanging out together in their environment, which are always great to get. Let me know if you've learned any lessons out in the field down below. I'm especially interested to hear if you've maybe learned from any mistakes, lessons learned the hard way. Maybe that's a topic for a future video. And as always, if you like this video, leave it a like down below and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one. It's been a super busy summer for me, so I haven't posted in a little bit, but now that I'm done with all my summer travel, I should be posting more consistently again. If you want to see me cover any specific topics related to wildlife photography, leave me a comment down below, and I'll see you next time.